Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Town, Ohio. Now, Youngstown has huge economic problems. So,
Hello, Judge Napolitano here.
Hi, how you doing today, Judge?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. You're with Farron on the Real News. It's an honor to have you with us today, Judge Napolitano, of Fox News Senior Judicial Analyst and also co-host of Brian and the Judge, and his latest book is called A Nation of Sheep. I want to say here, Judge Napolitano, that the book not only should win an award for best title, it should be required reading for all high school students across America.
Well, you're very kind to say that. You know, you toy quite a bit with the title, and you have even the words you use in the book with the title is something you have to negotiate with your publisher. And we were trying to capture the essence of what I wrote. And the essence of what I wrote is that only when we behave like sheep and forget that our roots were planted in the soil of freedom can we allow the government that we have elected to take our freedoms away. And that's exactly what has happened. And I've gotten some heat from some people saying, I'm a loyal Fox fan, how can you call me a sheep? Well, when you look the other way, while your elected representatives take your natural freedoms away from you because you're afraid of what might happen if they don't, then you're a sheep.
Well, I agree, and I didn't expect the book to be what the content is inside. It's an excellent read, and I recommend it to everyone. We're giving some away here on our radio program, too. And I wanted to start by asking you if you could first please summarize to our listeners what the Patriot Act represents and how it undermines the Constitution and how it was railroaded through our Congress.
Well, the Patriot Act is the most abominable piece of congressional legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were passed in 1798 and made it a crime to criticize members of the government. The Patriot Act, which was enacted on October 15, 2001, authorizes federal agents to write their own search warrants, thereby bypassing, avoiding, and evading the constitutional requirement in the Fourth Amendment that only judges can write search warrants. The Constitution only has two areas in it where it specifically prescribes a rule of criminal procedure, no doubt written so that a president and a Congress couldn't tamper with it, because the president and the Congress are bound by the Constitution just like the rest of us. One of those areas is the definition of treason and the means you have to undergo to prosecute for treason, and the other of those areas is what you have to do in order to get a search warrant. The Constitution says only judges can issue search warrants, and they can only do so after the government presents evidence of probable cause, meaning it is more likely than not that the person to be seized or the thing to be searched or the place to be searched contains evidence of a crime. The Patriot Act allows FBI agents and other federal agents to write their own search warrants, bypassing a judge. It doesn't require probable cause of crime. It doesn't require probable cause of anything. It only requires suspicion that the person may be involved in some act of terrorism. Suspicion, of course, is in the mind of an individual rather than probable cause, which is a quantifiable standard that a judge can ascertain. Now, you may say, well, if they showed up at my door with a self-written search warrant, I'd go to Bill O'Reilly at Fox News or somebody at the New York Times or Judge Napolitano, and I'd blast them for it. Well, you can't, because the same Patriot Act that allows them to write these search warrants makes it a crime for you to tell anyone about it. Now, think about it. You can't tell your spouse in your bedroom. You can't tell your lawyer in your lawyer's office. You can't hire a lawyer to challenge this thing. You can't tell a priest in confession. You can't even answer truthfully in a courtroom under oath whether or not you've received one of these self-written search warrants, because the Congress has made it a crime punishable by 5 years in jail for you to tell anyone about it. The House of Representatives was given 15 minutes to read the Patriot Act. It's over 300 pages long. It was posted on the House intranet, the internal internet, available to House members and senior staff only, because the Justice Department persuaded House leadership that the powers were so vital, so necessary, the terrorists were under every bedpost and behind every toilet, that the government needed that power so quickly, so urgently, that there wasn't time to debate. So there was literally no debate on the floor of the House of Representatives, and the summary that members read, because nobody could read 300 pages in 15 minutes, the summary that they read omitted telling them that it permitted FBI agents to write their own search warrants and omitted telling them that it was a crime for the recipient of the search warrant to tell anyone. So the Bush administration and the Republican Congress, and it pains me to attack friends of mine, but I must, has engaged in a systematic assault on the Fourth Amendment, the one that requires that only judges issue search warrants, and on the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
I think it's an amazing story, and I want to commend you for bringing this, because the public needs to be aware of this. Could you also summarize the National Security and Homeland Security Presidential Directive 20-15 and the Warner Act and the significance of each?
Well, those statutes authorize the President of the United States to declare a state of emergency on his own without any standards that he must reach and without any principles that he must lay down, without any findings that he must make, and most importantly, without any opportunity for a judge or anyone to review his declaration. And once he declares a state of emergency, and it could be weather-related, like Katrina, or it could be terrorism-related, like 9/11, or it could be whatever his or her imagination may be able to come up with. Once that declaration is made, then the President is authorized to violate the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act is legislation enacted at the end of Reconstruction, which guaranteed Americans throughout the land, not just in the South, that soldiers would never again be used, that the American military could never be used for ordinary law enforcement. The so-called John Warner Defense Act does away with that once the declaration of emergency has been made and authorizes the President to use the military for ordinary law enforcement. Now, the last time the military was used for ordinary law enforcement, and I mean everything from domestic violence to traffic stops, it was what we call Reconstruction. It was one of the worst times in our history in which the feds oppressively took away the rights of local and state governments to govern as they saw fit. George Bush and the Republican Congress, yet again, have turned a deaf ear and blind eye to history and have authorized a future president or this present president to do one of the most controversial, one of the most hateful, one of the most unconstitutional, and one of the most painful things the president can do, which is to put troops in the streets whenever he wants.
We're here today with Judge Napolitano, senior Fox News analyst and author of the book, A Nation of Sheep, and we're going to go to Brian with a question.
Judge, first, it's a true honor to be able to speak to you. You're a true patriot, and I would first like to thank you for standing up for both myself, my family, my friends, and of course all the sheep out there that are oblivious to most of what's happening.
Well, that's very kind of you, Brian. Thank you very much, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you, sir. My question, sir, is Thomas Jefferson once said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, expects what never was and never will be. Now, as I understand it, the Constitution is not here to defend the people. We, the people, are here to defend our Constitution. Are we seeing the general apathy and ignorance of the sheep in this country fueling the erosion of the loss of our civilization?
Well, that's a great question, Brian. And what we're really seeing is a government scaring the daylights out of people. You know, I, in preparation for this book, read all of FDR's fireside chats, and I am no fan of him. I think he was a socialist. But his fireside chats were not filled with fear.